End poverty. Eliminate extreme poverty in all its forms and ensure equal opportunities for all. Some people think it's a conspiracy. Instead, one can observe that entire populations are being made dependent on state subsidies, which results in society being insidiously led into a socialist system. Nations get trapped into debt through the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, from which they will never escape. Zero hunger. Achieve food security, improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. However, we observe the destruction of natural biological, small-scale agriculture, while at the same time, multinational corporations increasingly control global food production through industrial agriculture, genetic engineering, and agricultural chemicals. Health and wellness. Ensure healthy living and promote wellness for all at all ages. We observe instead, compulsory vaccination is being introduced everywhere, and natural healing methods are being suppressed or persecuted. As a result, people are being more and more dominated by the pharmaceutical industry, whose drugs have evidently sickened and even reduced the population. Quality education. Ensure inclusive, equitable, and quality education, and promote lifelong learning opportunities. Instead of this, as a result of Agenda 21 and 2030 in particular, the level of education has rather been declining worldwide. With the help of so-called educational standards and common core education, the population is being manipulated from an early age so that people become uncritical and accept anything, and as a result of this, remain passive. Gender equality. Achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Instead, we can observe the natural traditional family and lifestyles are vanishing. Women are being used as cheap labor, and children are being raised by the state. We have also been moving towards the goal of a genderless society for decades. While feminism is being pushed forward, on the other hand, all masculine characteristics are being suppressed. The promotion of a transgender ideology has dramatically increased the number of sex change operations among young people, which will ultimately allow reproduction to be controlled by the state. Clean water and sanitation. Ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. But the facts show the opposite and must be stated. 90% of the world's water is consumed by the raw material industry, which is dominated by multinational corporations. These same corporations are at the same time strongly promoting the privatization of water supply worldwide. Today, a few multinational corporations dominate global water markets, which is turning water more and more into a luxury good while preventing any self-sufficiency and independence for the population. Affordable and clean energy. Ensure access to affordable, secure, sustainable, and modern energy for all. The fact is, however, that in Germany, for example, the expansion of renewable energies has kicked up electricity prices tremendously. Above all, the consumers have been required to pay for this. Decent work and economic growth. Promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. But what can be observed is that international corporations are increasingly dictating working conditions through globalization, ruthlessly exploiting people, and at the same time, taking over or destroying smaller companies on a large scale. For example, the 5 largest internet companies alone took over 436 companies worth $131 billion in the past 10 years. The result is that ultimately only a handful of monopolizing groups will remain. Industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. However, it has to be stated that the opposite, so deindustrialization is taking place in numerous countries and has in some cases led to a significant increase in unemployment. At the same time, many countries, through promotional loans, were lured into government over-indebtedness and consequently into a debt trap. The result is a sellout of domestic resources, infrastructure, and manpower. Reducing inequalities. Reduce inequality within and between countries. Economist Valentine Lang examined in a study the consequences of globalization in 147 countries between 1970 and 2014, and he came to the following sobering conclusion. Although income differences between countries are narrowing, income gaps within the population are widening. While the incomes of the higher-earning upper class increased, the average population is the big loser. They are often plunged into poverty, hunger, and lack of prospects by international corporations, which are the main profiteers of globalization. These corporations ruthlessly exploit countries and their populations, resulting in an increase in inequality instead of the promised disparity reduction. Sustainable cities and communities. make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Instead of this, though, total surveillance of the population is rather being pushed in the name of security. For example, more and more countries are using facial recognition technology for surveillance. In public places in the cities, people's faces are automatically scanned and processed by an algorithm. In addition, strict gun laws are supposed to ensure greater security, but factually, gun bans do not disarm a single criminal, but only law-abiding citizens, thereby preventing rebellions by the people and solely ensuring the safety of the oligarchs and control of the resources. Responsible production and consumption. Ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. Instead of this, the imposition of penalizing taxes forced people to abandon proven technologies. For example, due to the CO2 tax on fossil fuel consumption, new coal-fired power plants are being dismantled in Germany, but continue to operate in other countries. The situation is similar for diesel vehicles. Climate action. Take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. Instead of this, pursuit of short-term gains at the expense of long-term environmental sustainability leads to accelerated loss of biodiversity, degradation of ecosystems, and exacerbation of climate change impacts. Underwater life. Conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources. Instead of this, they are using advanced technology to control the sea. By lowering sea levels could expose new land for habitation or agriculture, while raising them could flood coastal areas, causing displacement and loss. Life of terrestrial ecosystems. Protect, restore, and promote the sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, halt and reverse land degradation, and halt biodiversity loss. Instead of this, exploiting land resources without regard for environmental impact, such as deforestation, overgrazing, and mining, which leads to soil erosion, loss of biodiversity, and increased carbon emissions. Peace, justice, and strong institutions. Promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development. Provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions. Instead of this, deploying drones for constant monitoring of individuals or communities without their consent, using robots for covert surveillance operations, results in invasion of privacy, erosion of civil liberties, and creation of a surveillance state. Partnerships to achieve the objectives. Strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. Instead of this, using media, internet, and communication technologies to spread propaganda, control information, and manipulate public perception, which leads to control over public opinion, suppression of independent thought, and the creation of a uniform ideology.